Hey, welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to be showing you how to make a speed paint test palette. If you have one of these army paint or wet palettes, you'll notice there's a red section that's meant to hold the brushes. Like me, I don't use it for brushes or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is turn it into a speed paint test palette. I've seen it done before. People make them into a texture palette, which, to be honest, if you follow these steps, is exactly the same. But I'm going to begin by scoring the surface just to allow the glue to adhere a bit better to the surface, as I'm going to be using super glue because I know it's going to stick. Next, you're basically just going to raid your bits box, anything you've got laying around. So any leftover bits, the bits I'm using are from an Ogre Vanguard box set, so I had loads of spare parts, so I'm basically using all of them. But if you're using 3D printed things and you've got a load of sort of mistakes and things like that, just stick them down, as long as they're not raised too much above the surface to allow the lid to still sit on top. And then basically cover the surface in super glue and start placing the models and just trying to fill out as much of the gaps as you can. I did go through about 4 to 5 of the cheaper Yoo-hoo super glues, which you pick them up, I think they're about £1, £1.50 a tube. So that's what I use. So if you're planning on doing this, just make sure you've got a few extra, because you don't want to be halfway through, run out, and then have to go out halfway through and get more super glue. Also, I want to say, if you haven't got one of the Army Painter wet palettes with this sort of paintbrush holder, you can also use like an old Chinese tub takeout like pot. You can use any sort of Tupperware pot. You can use anything like that just to make this. So you haven't specifically got to have the Army Painter wet palette. Just wanted to say. And yeah, I did stick my fingers together numerous amount of times while using this super glue. If a bit didn't fit right, the moment I took it back up, my fingers were stuck together. So when you're doing this, just be careful, you know what I mean? You don't want to stick yourself to yourself. Out of the whole process, this is the longest bit, and it didn't take too long. It took me about 20 minutes. So again, as long as the bits, use some bases as well, just to give yourself a bit more flat area, anything that's got a lot of texture, because when you're using speed paint, you just want to make sure you get a good colour that will be in the highlights and the recesses, and you want to be able to see that without applying it to your model and potentially ruining what you're doing and have to reprime it and do that area again. Next, I decided to use some dried sharp sand that I use for basing to fill in all the gaps. You could either do this or not do it and just leave it with all the bits. It's entirely up to you. I added it just so it'd fill in the gaps and just give me another texture to work on. If you did do the dry sharp sand, then next step is once the super glue's gone off, bang it off, get all the excess off, because what you don't want to be doing is priming it all and then finding out bits are just flaking off all the time. Next, what we're going to do is give it a prime white, as white is the best base coat to use for speed paint. If you did want to make this a texture palette as well, what you could always do is prime half of it white and half of it black. That way you'd have half of it for dry brushing and the other half for testing your speed paint. As you can see, just going over these little bits, if you want to see how a colour would react and what it would actually look like when it's dry, instead of testing it on your model, you can paint the palette, see how it dries, see if you like the colour. But if you're like me, I mainly like mixing my speed paints to get different shades, and I normally mix like green and brown to get a really nice dirty brown. So instead of testing it on the model going, I hope it's going to be alright, you can use the palette. And also, if you wanted to test it over a blue zenithal highlight, so you go with a blue base coat and then prime it on top of that white and then go over with speed paint, you'll be able to test it on this just to see if it would change the colour. Similar to what I did, I painted up a dragon and I primed, basically coloured it all red and then used a blue sort of speed paint or wash, and it tinged it purple, which looked amazing. So it had like a purple to red sort of colour on the scales. And there you have it, fits back with the lid on. If this video was helpful and you liked it, if you could leave a like and subscribe, I'd really appreciate it. Till next time, enjoy your painting.